If I had known that my hands would cook the meal I'd be excluded from, I would have let the turkey burn. 2 days, 48 hours. That's how long I'd spent brining, baking, slicing, stirring. Hell, I even ironed the tablecloths. My knees screamed, and my back ached, but the aroma of rosemary and clove made it feel worth it. Until I stood there, serving spoon in hand, and Amanda, my daughter-in-law, smiled that brittle smile and said, "You don't need to sit. Just grab a plate and stand." Just like that. No one looked up. Not Rick, my eldest, whose first steps happened right there by the fireplace. Not Carol, my own sister, busy pouring herself another glass of wine. They all just kept laughing, passing dishes, clinking glasses. I stood frozen at the edge of the dining room, the steam from the sweet potato casserole fogging up my glasses. For a second, I truly thought she must be joking. Me? The one who hadn't missed a Thanksgiving in over 30 years? The one who roasted her first turkey the same year my husband died? But then Rick chuckled and said, "Come on, Mom, there's no room. Just fix yourself a plate." No room. At my own table. The pain came hot and fast, like touching a stovetop. My chest clenched, but I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. I set the spoon down gently, steady hands, always steady, and walked right out the back door into the garage. Locked it behind me. I've never been one for dramatics, but let me tell you, something broke in me then, not like a plate shattering, more like a hairline crack in the foundation you don't see until the walls shift. 16 years. That's how long I've hosted Thanksgiving since my husband Martin passed. I've basted turkeys through grief, through a knee replacement, through power outages and family arguments. I've peeled potatoes with arthritic hands, stitched napkins with Carol by my side, back when she was still on my side, and watched the kids grow up around this table. My table. And yet this year, I didn't even rate a chair. When I finally came back inside, nobody asked where I'd been. Amanda was already handing out slices of pie she hadn't baked, grinning like a queen presiding over her little kingdom. Rick gave me a side hug, one of those loose, distracted ones, like a pat on the head. "Great meal, Mom," he said, mouthful. Amanda really pulled it together. Pulled it together? I spent 2 days preparing that feast. She reheated rolls and added whipped cream to a store-bought pumpkin pie. But he gave her the credit, and no one corrected him. Not even Carol, who used to call me every year just to say, "Nobody makes a bird like you do, Jules." I don't know when I became invisible. Maybe it started small, when they stopped asking me to carve the turkey. When Amanda brought her own centerpiece, because the kids like modern. When Rick forgot my birthday last year and sent me a gift card to a store that closed in 2018. But this was different. This was public. And the worst part? They all let it happen. My son, my sister, my grandchildren, who smiled at me with mouths full of food I made, not realizing they were watching me disappear. Later that night, after the guests had gone, and the dishes were piled like ruins in the sink, I opened a bottle of wine and sat alone at the head of the table. The only time I'd touched that chair all day. I looked at the empty seats, the stained napkins, the flickering candle Amanda brought in a 3-pack from Target, and I made a decision. I would never spend another holiday this way. I would never again beg for space at a table I built with my own 2 hands. They wanted the food, the house, the tradition. But not me? Fine. They can have the turkey, but I'm taking the recipe, and everything else they never thought I'd leave with. The next morning, the smell of roasted turkey still clung to the curtains, but the warmth was gone, like the house itself was embarrassed. I washed the serving spoons alone. My fingers ached from scrubbing, but it felt better than sitting still. What else could I do? There were no leftovers to share this year. Amanda had packed up most of the food, for the kids, barely asking. She left me 2 dinner rolls and a piece of my own apple pie wrapped in foil like a consolation prize. I didn't touch it. Instead, I opened the drawer by the sink and took out a small velvet box. My wedding ring had been in there since the day Martin passed. 16 years it sat untouched, right next to the bottle opener, and a pair of old reading glasses I never had the heart to throw away. That morning, I slid the ring back into its box, closed the lid, and tucked it into the far back corner of the drawer. Martin used to carve the turkey every year, quietly, proudly. He'd kiss the top of my head after everyone complimented the stuffing and whisper, "They don't know it's just stovetop with onions." And we'd laugh. God, we'd laugh. I miss that more than I can explain. Rick was different back then. He used to cry over the stuffing. Literally. The first year after his father died, he sat at the table with tears running down his face and said, "It tastes just like Dad made it." I remember holding his hand so tight it turned red. That boy is gone. Replaced by a man who didn't even ask where I went after Amanda humiliated me in my own kitchen. I stood in the dining room staring at the tablecloth, still wrinkled from the night before, and wondered, was I just the help all along? A seasonal employee? Someone they pulled out of storage like the gravy boat? There was no crying, not yet. Just a quiet sorting of memories. I found myself walking from room to room, touching things I hadn't really seen in years. The recipe box. The quilt I finished the winter after Martin's death. The photo of Rick at his college graduation, the only one where he's looking right at me. Did I really do all that for this? For a chair I wasn't allowed to sit in? For so many years I thought my worth was tied to the dinner table. That as long as I made the sweet potatoes just right, or folded the napkins in that little fan shape they liked, I would still matter. But what good is gratitude that only lasts as long as the gravy's hot? That evening, I called Debbie, my neighbor and oldest friend since Martin died, and asked if she wanted to come over for tea. She brought scones and a flask of something. Just to warm us up? I told her everything. She didn't gasp or interrupt. She just listened, refilled my cup, and nodded, like someone who's lived through her own heartbreak. "You ever wonder," she said, "if maybe we taught them to treat us like this, always being the reliable one, always cleaning up the mess?" I didn't answer her. But the next morning, I started cleaning the attic. And I found my wedding scrapbook, taped edges, lace sleeves pressed between tissue paper, and a note Martin wrote me on our first Thanksgiving together. "You make every house a home." I closed it gently. I had made a home. But they don't live here anymore. It was the clinking of dishes that led me to the hallway. Amanda's voice drifted out of the kitchen, that brittle tone she used when she thought I wasn't listening. "She won't be cooking much longer anyway," she said with a little laugh. "We'll just cater next year. Easier all around." And then Rick, my son. Honestly, it'd be a relief. I'm sick of the guilt trips. They didn't know I was in the hallway. They couldn't see me standing there, one hand pressed to the wall like I needed it to hold me up. I didn't cry. I didn't even make a sound. I just stood there, invisible in my own home, listening to the two people I had loved most, trusted most, talk about me like I was expired milk in the back of their fridge. "Outdated recipes, outdated opinions," Amanda chuckled. "She still thinks cranberry sauce should be homemade. Like anyone notices." "I notice," I whispered. But no one heard. I backed away slowly, like some wild thing afraid of being seen. Every step felt heavier than the last. When I got to my bedroom, I locked the door and sat on the edge of the bed, my hands shaking so hard I had to tuck them between my knees. Later that night, when they were gone and the house was mine again, I did something I hadn't done in years. I pulled out an old notebook. The kind I used back when I was teaching 4th grade, thick paper, worn edges, a cover that still smelled faintly of chalk. And I wrote down everything. November 24th, Amanda, you don't need to sit. Just grab a plate and stand. November 25th, Rick laughed when she said they'd cater next year. Less drama, he said. November 25th, Amanda mocked my stuffing, called it dry nostalgia. I kept writing until the page was full. Then I flipped to the next. My handwriting looked smaller than it used to. Neater. Tighter. Like I was squeezing every ounce of myself into those little lines. I wrote not to remember, but to make sure I never forgot. This wasn't just a bad Thanksgiving. This was a pattern. I thought back to the time Amanda forgot to invite me to the twins' piano recital. The time Rick said, "It's just easier if you don't bring gifts. We're doing minimalism now." The time Carol snapped, "Why do you always make things about you?" because I had asked if I could say grace. Small things. Easy to dismiss, easy to forgive. But snowflakes build avalanches. I closed the notebook and placed it in the drawer by my bed. Then I turned out the light. But I didn't sleep. I listened to the sounds of the house, my house. The faint buzz of the refrigerator, the creak of the floor settling. The tick of Martin's old watch on the nightstand, still ticking after all these years. I used to believe that being quiet was the same as keeping the peace. That if I just smiled and served, I could hold the family together with pot roast and politeness. But you can only bite your tongue so many times before it starts to scar. So I made a decision. From now on, I would write it all down. Every insult dressed as advice. Every joke at my expense. Every time they forgot I was human, and not just the woman who filled their plates. I wasn't sure what I'd do with it yet, but I knew this. They thought I wouldn't notice, wouldn't push back, wouldn't ever leave. And maybe I didn't have to leave. Not yet. Maybe the first step wasn't walking away. Maybe it was simply watching. The next morning, I cracked 2 eggs into a pan and didn't even bother to season them. I wasn't hungry. I just needed something to do with my hands. I sat at the kitchen table, the one I'd refinished myself the year after Martin died. Every scratch on it told a story. Rick's high school science project, Carol's wine glass toppled during a game night, Amanda's first attempt at decorating Christmas cookies. I used to think love meant absorbing the damage. This morning, I realized love can also mean saying, enough. So when Rick and Amanda wandered into the kitchen, yawning and stretching like they hadn't gutted me 12 hours ago, I didn't ask how they slept. I didn't offer coffee. I didn't ask about the kids. Instead, I set my fork down, wiped my mouth with a napkin, and said, plain as day, I won't be cooking for this family anymore. Amanda laughed first. Oh, come on, Julia. You say that every time you're tired. Rick smirked. You'll change your mind by Christmas. I won't, I said. They blinked. The room went quiet except for the hum of the fridge. Amanda tilted her head like I was a confused child. Who's going to do Thanksgiving next year? Carol? She burns toast. Rick tried to keep it light. Mom, you're just upset. You always go all out, and it takes a lot out of you. No? I said, standing. I'm not upset. I'm finished. They both stared at me then, really stared, like I'd grown 2 heads, like they were seeing me for the first time in decades and couldn't believe what I looked like. Rick opened his mouth, but Amanda touched his arm. She just needs a break, she whispered. It's fine. But I wasn't whispering anymore. I spent 2 days cooking for people who couldn't even make room for me at the table, and not one of you noticed I was gone for half the meal. Still nothing, not even an apology. Just that same glazed look, like I was background noise they hadn't expected to start speaking. I walked out without clearing the plates, left the frying pan in the sink. I always cleaned as I cooked. Always. But this time, I left the mess right where it was. If they wanted food and cleanliness and grace, they could find it elsewhere. An hour later, Debbie knocked on the back door holding a tin of cranberry scones and a knowing smile. Heard some sharp voices from next door, she said gently. Thought you might want some company. I let her in. We sat at the same kitchen table, and for the first time in a long while, I poured myself a cup of tea and didn't feel like I had to perform. Debbie looked at me, really looked, then said, You don't have to be their matriarch anymore. You can just be Julia. That sentence hit harder than any insult Amanda ever threw at me. I didn't even know who just Julia was. I don't think they'll believe me, I said. They will when you stop showing up. We talked for an hour, maybe 2. Long enough for the eggs to go cold on the plate. Debbie told me about her nephew, Malik, a young lawyer who had helped her untangle her husband's estate when things got messy. If you ever want to talk to someone smart who listens, he's your guy. I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no either. When Debbie left, I wrote 3 more entries in my notebook. Then I made a list of every holiday I'd hosted since Martin passed. 16. 16 feasts, 16 centerpieces. 16 times I put everyone else first. And not once did anyone ask me what I wanted to do for Thanksgiving. I hadn't used the landline in over a year, but that morning, I picked it up like I was 40 again, balancing the phone between my ear and shoulder, one hand already reaching for my planner. "Debbie," I said, "you still have that nephew of yours, the lawyer?" There was a pause on the other end, then a cautious, "Malik? Why, what's going on, hon?" "I just need someone who knows how to read fine print. And someone who won't assume I'm being hysterical." She didn't ask questions. Just gave me the number and told me to call before noon. "He's sharp," she said, "and he doesn't talk down to people." By 2 p.m., I was sitting across from Malik in Debbie's kitchen, her cat weaving between our legs, her kettle whistling in the background. He was young, probably no more than 30, with kind eyes and a notepad already open. "Take your time," he said gently, like I was made of glass but still whole. "What made you want to talk to me?" I slid a folder across the table, paperwork I hadn't touched in years. The deed to the house. Martin's old will. The one Rick and I co-managed after his father died, because it made sense at the time. "I just want to know what's mine," I said, "and what they can get their hands on if I keel over." Malik took his time reading, nodding slowly. "You're listed as sole owner now, which is good. But there's something else." He flipped through a few more pages. "You named Rick as your financial power of attorney in 2012? "Yes," I said. "Back when I had that surgery on my hip." He hesitated. "Ma'am, has anyone, your son, for example, talked to you recently about updating your will?" I nodded. "Not directly. But his wife mentioned something about simplifying things, making it easier for the kids." Malik pursed his lips. "I'd suggest we make some changes." Quietly. He started listing terms. Revocation clauses, estate protection, living trusts. Some of it went over my head, but I understood the most important part. If I didn't move first, they could. I felt the flush of heat rise up my neck. That familiar, sinking mix of shame and clarity. I'd raised Rick to be cautious, responsible, thoughtful. Or, so I thought. Malik handed me a clean notepad. "Write down every account, every item of value, financial, sentimental, real estate, anything with meaning." I wrote for almost an hour, my hand cramped halfway through. But when I was done, the list was longer than I expected. My home, my silver set from Martin's mother, my retirement savings, my wedding quilt, the painting over the fireplace, the grandfather clock, the locket I wore under my collar that nobody ever asked about. "I'll help you secure it all," Malik said. "And then we'll set up protections that don't require anyone else's approval." When I got home, I pulled out a yellow legal pad from the drawer and wrote at the top in thick black ink, "Inventory, what I own, what they assume." I stayed up late that night, listing, checking, sorting. I found a whole drawer of receipts from when I helped Rick and Amanda with their first mortgage. Not gifts, loans I'd been too soft to call by name. I found the letter Martin wrote me on our 20th anniversary. The one where he said, "You've held this family together with your bare hands." Well, not anymore. My hands were still strong, still steady. But now, they were finally mine again. That Sunday, I didn't go. No roast in the oven, no pie cooling on the counter. For the first time in 15 years, I skipped family dinner. I stayed in my robe till noon, drank coffee on the porch, and watched the neighborhood kids play tag across the street. The kind of quiet Sunday Martin used to say was medicine for the soul. By 6 o'clock, my phone hadn't buzzed once. Not even a, "Where are you?" or a "Dinner's starting." Instead, Amanda sent a meme, a picture of a turkey holding a sign that read, "Retired from cooking, pass the takeout," with a laughing emoji. I stared at it for a long moment, then deleted it without replying. 3 hours later, Rick finally texted, "You okay, Mom?" I didn't answer. Because here's the truth. I was okay. More okay than I'd been in a long time. I stood at the stove and scrambled 2 eggs, not for anyone else, for me. I made toast, buttered it the way I like, and ate dinner barefoot, with the radio playing some old jazz record Martin used to love. I kept expecting the phone to ring again. It didn't. I'd thought, somewhere deep inside, that my absence would cause a stir. That they'd panic. That someone would show up at my door with a, "We missed you, Mom," and maybe even a slice of that chocolate cake I used to bake for Rick's birthday. But no, it turns out, when the maid doesn't show up, they just order in. That night, I pulled the group chat open, the one we used for everything: birthdays, holidays, who's bringing the potato salad. I hovered for a second, then I tapped the 3 dots at the top and hit leave conversation. No alert. No, are you sure? Just gone. That silence was deafening and oddly peaceful. In the days that followed, I found myself walking through the house differently, noticing what was mine. The way light hit the window over the sink, the smell of lemon oil on the floors I used to clean before they came over, just so Amanda wouldn't comment. I started making plans, real ones, quiet ones. I went to the post office and picked up a change of address form. Didn't fill it out yet, just held it. Let myself imagine what it would mean. I found a box of old postcards Martin and I had collected from our honeymoon trip. Italy. Back when we could barely afford the airfare. He wrote, "Let's never stop adventuring," on one, even though we'd gotten food poisoning the night before from undercooked clams. I smiled for the first time in days. Later I called Debbie and told her I was thinking of taking a little trip. "Where?" she asked. "Anywhere," I said. "Everywhere," Debbie chuckled. "You haven't skipped a Sunday dinner in 15 years, Jules. Don't stop now. Disappear on them a little." I hung up and went to the closet. Started pulling out suitcases, not to pack, just to remind myself I still could. The next morning, I stood in the center of my living room and said it out loud, just once. They didn't even notice. And that, right there, was the moment it all snapped into place. They didn't panic. Because they didn't miss me, they missed the service. The routine. The woman who made sure the turkey was done just right, who cleaned up without being asked, who laughed off every slight. But Julia, the person, they hadn't seen her in years. So I started making her visible again, first by disappearing. The call from Carol came on a Tuesday morning, just as I was pulling banana bread from the oven. She never calls on Tuesdays, which meant she wasn't calling for me. "Hey, Jules," she started, all honey and hesitation. "I just got off the phone with Rick." I didn't answer right away, just set the bread on the cooling rack and waited. "He's worried about you," she said, voice too light, too rehearsed. "He says you've been distant." I replied, wiping my hands on a towel. Interesting word choice. Carol sighed, like I was the difficult one. "He mentioned you're not answering the group chat. That you missed Sunday dinner. I wasn't hungry." Another pause. Then she cut to it. "Julia, he also said you've been acting forgetful. That maybe it's time he steps in, takes on more responsibility with the house, your finances, just to lighten the load." I pressed the phone tighter to my ear. My heart dropped, but my voice stayed calm. "He said that?" She lowered hers. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be. He's just trying to help. You're getting older. We all are." There it was, the quiet campaign. Not just to sideline me, but to replace me. I swallowed hard and stared at the banana bread. Martin loved it with too much cinnamon. Rick used to steal slices before they cooled. I'd made it for them both for decades. Now it sat there, untouched and unwanted, just like me. "Carol," I said slowly, "I've lived in this house for 43 years. Paid it off myself. Managed everything from mortgages to Martin's funeral costs without help. But now, after one skip dinner, you and Rick are ready to start checking for signs of decline?" "You're twisting this," she said quickly. "We're just concerned." "About my assets," I corrected. Silence. Then, "You've always been dramatic, Jules. You don't need to turn this into a thing." "Oh, it's already a thing," I whispered. "You just didn't think I'd notice." I hung up before she could defend herself. I stood there, the scent of warm bread wrapping around me like a blanket that no longer fit. And for the first time in weeks, I shook. Not from sadness, but from rage. They weren't just careless anymore, they were calculating. Rick, my son, the boy I held through fevers and breakups, was laying the groundwork to take over, spinning a narrative. The forgetful old woman, the fragile widow, the one who'd better sign things over before she accidentally burns the house down or misplaces a check. Well, I may be many things, but I am not a fool. That afternoon I called Malik. "Time to move faster," I said. He didn't ask questions, just said, "Come by tomorrow." That evening I pulled out my notebook and flipped to a fresh page. March 14th, Carol. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Rick is ready to take over. And under that I wrote in thick black ink, "They want control, not care." That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling, my mind running laps around every moment I'd second-guessed myself. Every time I'd wondered if I'd misunderstood, if maybe I was being dramatic, ungrateful, paranoid. But no, it was never in my head. It was in their whispers, their texts, their jokes, their plans. Well, let them plan. Because I was planning now too. Only mine wouldn't involve control. Mine would involve escape, and the kind of revenge that tastes best served cold, and with legal documentation. By Friday, the dining room was bare. No more lace tablecloths. No more polished silver tray with its tiny scratches from decades of careful hosting. I'd packed it all, wrapped in newspaper, and sealed in boxes marked for me. The cleaning crew arrived that morning. Not the usual women from down the street. New ones, young and efficient, found through Debbie's church bulletin. They wiped down walls, steamed carpets, and packed anything I pointed to without asking why. "I'm getting ready for a change," I told the youngest, a girl named Angie with kind eyes and chipped nail polish. "Spring cleaning?" she asked. I smiled. Let's call it a clean sweep. By noon, 5 boxes were delivered to Debbie's garage. Inside were my documents, keepsakes, old tax returns, a ceramic angel from Martin's nightstand, and every photograph I cared to save. Malik helped me secure them with locks. Each box tagged with a number, each number matched to a list in my purse. I kept the keys in my apron pocket. Felt right somehow, where I used to keep peppermints for the twins. I told no one. Not Carol, not Rick, not Amanda. If they noticed the bookshelves thinning, the attic door open, they didn't say. They weren't looking for signs of departure, only for signs of weakness. That same night, I stood in the hall holding a yellow notepad and wrote a new title, "What They Will Never Take Again." The list grew longer than I expected. My time, my voice, my recipes, my silence, my memories of Martin, the house I made a home, the dignity they mistook for docility. I stuck it to the back of the linen closet door, my own little manifesto, hidden behind old towels and holiday napkins. The next morning, I walked through each room like a woman getting ready to leave a hotel, straightened the pillows, watered the plants, cleared the dishes. Not because I had to, but because it was mine. For the first time in years, I wasn't acting for them. Not scrubbing to impress Amanda, not setting the table for Carol's approval, not preparing for Rick's half-hearted compliments. I was preparing for me. That afternoon I called Malik again. "Everything's boxed and ready," I said. "Next step? We'll transfer titles and draft the new will this week," he said. "You're making good time, Julia." I almost laughed. "Not fast," I said, "but steady." I think that's what stunned me most. The quietness of it all. No screaming, no tears, just the slow, deliberate gathering of myself, like sewing up a dress that had been unraveling thread by thread. When Amanda stopped by later that week to borrow my pie dish, the one her mother gave me, I told her it was already packed. "For what?" she asked, blinking. "Let's just say I'm making room." She didn't get it. She smiled that vacant smile she wore when she wasn't really listening, and said, "Oh, okay. Well, just let me know when it turns up." It wouldn't, and she'd figure that out soon enough. That evening, Debbie and I sipped wine on her back porch, wrapped in old quilts and watching the birds settle into the trees. "You're really doing this," she said. I nodded. "Tired of being someone else's anchor?" "You've always been the one holding the ship steady," she said, reaching over and squeezing my hand. "Maybe it's time I became the tide." That night, I slept like a woman who had vacuumed under every rug, who had erased every breadcrumb they might use to trace their way back to my good graces. And in the morning, I woke to silence, the good kind, the kind that means you are no longer waiting for anyone. The papers were signed on a Monday. It felt like paying off a long overdue bill, one I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying in my chest for years. Malik slid the documents across his oak desk, each one neatly tabbed and labeled. "Power of attorney," he said, tapping the top page. "Effective immediately. You've removed Rick's name entirely. If he tries anything now, he'll hit a wall." "And the will?" I asked, even though I'd read it twice. "Filed and protected," Malik nodded. "You've named Debbie as executor, with clear instructions." I exhaled so deeply my shoulders dropped an inch. Gone was the line that made Rick heir to the house. Gone were the provisions that left Amanda the antique china set she used once and mocked twice. Gone was the expectation that loyalty had earned them legacy. In their place, clarity. I left half my estate to a local women's shelter, another quarter to the community art school Martin once volunteered for. And the final piece, well, that was a little surprise, tucked inside a letter they wouldn't read until long after the dust settled. Malik handed me a fresh copy of everything in a thick folder. "You've done something most people never find the courage to do." "I didn't do it out of courage," I said. "I did it out of exhaustion." He smiled gently. "Sometimes that's enough." As I left his office, the wind picked up, a chill brushing past my collar like someone whispering, "You've done it, old girl. You've finally done it." I drove straight to the bank and moved every account into my own name, locking the biggest one behind a trust they'd never be able to crack. The bank manager called me Mrs. Martin 3 times, even after I corrected him. Didn't matter. Let them remember me however they wanted. I knew who I was now. That night, I made a different kind of guest list. Not for dinner, not for holidays, but for my life. At the top, I wrote, "Who shows up when I stop serving?" I listed only 2 names. Debbie. Myself. That was it. That was all. And for the first time, it felt like enough. The next morning, I walked into the spare bedroom, where Amanda used to change the twins and Rick once napped after big meals, and began turning it into a study. My study. I carried in my old recipe box and placed it on the desk beside the notebook of betrayals. Then I opened a new journal, this one with a floral cover and a crisp new pen. On the first page I wrote, "This book is not for them." Every entry after would be about what I built next, not what I lost. That afternoon, I called the real estate agent Malik recommended, a young woman named Clarice with a sharp bob and sharper questions. "Are you planning to stay in the area?" she asked. "For now," I said, "but I want options." "Well," she said, tapping her tablet, "it's a seller's market, especially with a property like yours." "What kind of property is that?" I asked, even though I already knew. She smiled. "A home that was clearly loved, but one that's ready for something new." So was I. As the sun dipped behind the trees, I stood in the kitchen. Bare counters, clean sink, no scent of gravy or disappointment, and brewed myself a pot of mint tea, the kind I liked. No one had ever asked, and I sat at my small table, lit one candle, and toasted my quiet little revolution. To new names on papers, to old names erased, to the most satisfying kind of guest list, the one where no one gets an automatic seat. A week later, I mailed the cards. Holiday cards. Not fancy ones, not store-bought with glitter or pre-written cheer. Just plain, white envelopes, each sealed by hand, each name written in the same, slow, careful print I'd once used to label Rick's school supplies. Inside each one was a single sentence. "Thank you for teaching me the difference between tradition and servitude." No return address, no family photo, just those 13 words. Rick's envelope went to his office, Amanda's to the house. They'd insisted on separate ones, even though I knew she'd open his too. Carol's I dropped in the mailbox down the road, where I used to send her birthday cards every year, with a scratch-off ticket tucked inside. I didn't send one to the grandchildren. This wasn't about them. They would understand one day. Or they wouldn't. Either way, it wouldn't be my burden anymore. I'd expected silence. Maybe a few text messages. What I didn't expect was Amanda's Facebook status. It's always the bitter ones who rewrite history. Don't let toxic elders ruin your peace. It had her fingerprints all over it. Vague enough for deniability, sharp enough to sting. I took a screenshot and filed it in my notebook. Right between the entry about the pie she left on my porch and the note about Rick handling things if I got forgetful. But I didn't reply, didn't comment, didn't even react. Because silence, now, was my favorite sound. It didn't need to apologize. It didn't interrupt. It didn't manipulate. It simply cleared the space for truth. Debbie and I spent the afternoon organizing her garage, where my 5 boxes now sat like little soldiers. She dusted off an old lamp and said, "They'll never see it coming, you know." "I hope not," I said. "I want them to look up one day and realize I've already left the picture." I started spending more time outside. Early walks around the block, evenings reading on the porch wrapped in Martin's old blanket. I stopped jumping when my phone buzzed. I stopped checking my email. I stopped waiting. They'd trained me to believe that if I wasn't involved, I wasn't needed. Turns out, they weren't needed. I was still standing. Better than standing. Walking away. Malik called on Thursday to confirm the last paperwork was finalized. My name, and only my name, was now tied to every account, every deed, every key that once sat in Rick's drawer. "Anything else you want done?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "I want a document stating that I am of sound mind. Sign it, stamp it, frame it if you have to." He chuckled. "Covering all bases, huh?" "No," I said. "I'm just giving them nothing left to twist." That night, I lit a candle in the dining room. Just one. Not for decoration, not for company, just for me. And as the flame flickered, I looked around at the room where so much had been taken. My chair, my voice, my space, and I whispered into that silence. "Not anymore. I don't know if they'll ever realize the damage they did wasn't loud. It wasn't a fight. It wasn't name-calling. It was the slow, creeping corrosion of being expected to serve and smile at the same time. Of being erased, politely. Well, now I'd erase them. Quietly, cleanly. And they hadn't even noticed the cut. Thanksgiving morning arrived crisp and bright. No oven humming. No turkey defrosting in the sink. No timers beeping. The house smelled like lemon polish and open windows, not cinnamon or shame. I made a single cup of coffee, sat on the porch wrapped in Martin's blanket, watched the sun warm the fence line and thought, they're probably panicking right about now. And they were. I know this because at 10:17 a.m., Amanda showed up, uninvited. She knocked lightly, holding a reusable grocery bag and wearing what she probably thought passed for an apologetic smile. "I just need to borrow a serving tray," she chirped, already pushing the screen door open. Except the house was empty. No chairs, no rugs, no centerpiece. Just walls and floors and echoes. She froze in the doorway. Her smile fell first. Then her eyes darted around like she was seeing ghosts. "Julia?" she called, stepping inside. Her heels clicked on bare wood as she looked from room to room, growing more frantic with every door she opened. The table? Gone. The hutch? Sold. The kitchen cabinets? Empty. She pulled out her phone, dialed fast. "Rick? You need to get over here right now. Her house is empty." I watched from Debbie's kitchen window across the street. We'd made cinnamon rolls, fresh, hot, just for us, and I had a cup of tea warming both my hands. Debbie didn't say a word. She just passed me a pair of binoculars like we were bird watching. 5 minutes later, Rick pulled up. Fast. No coat. Just a hoodie and panic. He didn't even knock. Just stormed through the front door like he still had a claim on something. I could see it all from where I sat. Amanda pacing, Rick checking his phone, then pacing too. They called my number. Twice. Both calls went to a disconnected line. Rick tried the back door, walked the length of the backyard like I might be hiding behind a tree with the mashed potatoes. And then, the realization. I watched it hit them, like heat rising off pavement, the slow understanding that there was nothing left for them here. No dinner, no speech, no apology, no inheritance to circle like buzzards. They stood in the driveway longer than they needed to. Amanda crossed her arms. Rick kept swiping his phone, like the screen would suddenly reveal a version of me that hadn't walked away. And I just sipped my tea. They hadn't just been locked out of a house. They'd been locked out of me. Legally, emotionally, permanently. Later that day, Clarice, the real estate agent, led a couple through the house. Young, bright-eyed, carrying a toddler on one hip. The woman gasped at the bay window in the living room. I could see a Christmas tree right there, she said. I smiled, because I used to say the same thing. Clarice nodded toward the kitchen. The former owner was a school teacher, made incredible Thanksgiving dinners. And that was all she said. Not bitter old woman. Not toxic matriarch. Just former owner. I liked that. Simple. True. Uncomplicated. Back across the street, Debbie poured us another cup. How's it feel? Lighter, I said. Like I took off a coat I didn't realize I'd been wearing for 30 years. We ate too much cinnamon roll. We laughed too loud. At one point, I snorted tea through my nose and didn't even feel embarrassed. And for the first time in 16 years, Thanksgiving belonged to me. No forced smiles. No one asking where the gravy boat was. No one telling me I used too much time. 3 days later, I posted the letter. Not in a card. Not in an envelope. Online. It was a simple black and white post on the community forum, where I used to share recipes and yard sale updates. Under my full name too. No hiding. The title, Why I Quit Thanksgiving. I wrote it in one sitting, no edits, no second guessing. I told the truth, plain and quiet. 16 years of cooking, of wiping plates and faces and tears. 16 years of traditions they called hers when they were convenient, and outdated when they weren't. I wrote about the pie Amanda mocked, the chair I wasn't allowed to sit in, the serving spoon I gripped like a lifeline, while laughter echoed around me. I wrote about how silence had been my way of keeping peace, until I realized silence was just permission to be erased. And I wrote about leaving, about packing, about choosing myself, finally. No names. No slander, just truth. By dinner time, the post had over 200 likes and 38 comments, most from women I'd never met. I felt every word. My daughter-in-law does the same thing. I haven't been to a family dinner in 3 years. Thank you for saying it out loud. Debbie called me half laughing, half sobbing. Julia, she said, you went viral. At least, local viral. I smiled. Maybe someone else will light their own match. The next day, Carol called. Her voice trembled at the edges. Can we talk privately? No, I said. She hesitated, waiting, as if I'd fill in the space like I always used to. I didn't. I didn't know it had gotten that bad, she whispered. It didn't get bad, I said. It was bad. You just didn't look. Silence again. And for once, I didn't try to fix it. She hung up before I could. Rick texted the day after. Was that about us? I didn't respond. Amanda didn't reach out at all. I'm sure she read it. I'm sure she hated every word. And I'm sure she'll tell everyone I've lost my mind. That's fine. Let her. It's easy to call someone crazy when they finally stop making your life easier.